Here we go, episode 2 of How Do You Manage on NTT20. I'm Ali Maxwell, joined by Richie Wellens. Whether it's in your office in Swindon, where I forgot to turn the microphone on and the audio of the interview was completely ruined, or the after party of the EFL Awards, always a pleasure to see you.
Yeah, well, at least you've turned the mic on this time, yeah. But I do remember that. In fact, I remember the first occasion a lot more than the second occasion.
Well, it's because I practically wet myself. I mean, we're talking at an interesting time on a few levels. On-pitch stuff, off-pitch stuff. Off-pitch stuff being the bang in the middle of the January transfer window. And I'm always wondering when I chat to managers, is the January transfer window the best time to be a manager or the worst time to be a manager?
Well, it depends what club you're at. If you're one of the smaller clubs in the division with good players who people want to take off you, or you've got loan players that have the threat of being recalled, then it's not a great situation to be in. If you're one of the big boys that have money to spend, that might need adding one or two to certain areas of the pitch, or you've got a few injuries, then obviously it's a brilliant time. Just bang in the middle of the season, you just had a huge load of games over the Christmas and New Year. So I would imagine for the bigger boys, an ideal time to add. The ones that they expect to get promoted and put themselves in a brilliant position can start to maybe look at the summer and maybe moving up a league. So I think it works in both ways.
When it comes to yourself and to Orient, at what point do you get involved with transfer targets and deciding what's, a good option versus, that's someone we want to go after?
Yeah, I mean, it's an ever ongoing process. We don't just, as soon as the summer window is shut, we don't just then shut it away and not speak about it for months and months and wait till January. It's always ongoing. We've got a few irons in the fire. We're just waiting on clubs to say, yes, we'll allow this player to join you. And as you begin in the middle of the window, you're actually waiting for players and clubs to accept your offer. As soon as it gets to the end of the window, you know what it's like. It's like a rat race then, and things open up and things move. It's kind of like a domino effect that once one player leaves here, then obviously everybody needs to fill their spaces. So we hope to get movement. We hope that before the weekend fixture in the league, we'll have one, maybe two in.
And when players are brought to you, presented to you by those who are working day to day on the recruitment side, your initial instinct, do you want to know numbers? Do you want to know player profile, scouting type stuff? Do you want to go straight to some video clips? From your point of view, what's the best way of getting you up to speed and having an idea of a player?
I think first and foremost, is the player available? Are the club willing to let him go? Can we afford him? And does the player want to come to us? Otherwise, before he gets into nuts and bolts of will he fit into our team? Does he have the certain qualities for the position that we're looking for? You need to know if the player is available. It's nothing worse than wasting your time and going down a load of videos and analysis and going through all the data and thinking that this player will fit into your team really, really well, to then get to the stage where he's not available by the club or we simply can't afford him. So I think for me, start off at the bottom and then work the way up.
We're chatting at a pretty remarkable time for Orient, where I was trying to go back to the start of the run and I was doing some Googling and I found I don't know if it was BBC or Sky Sports post-match piece from the 3rd of December, and the title was "A Huge Win Lifts Orient Out of the Bottom Four." We're currently in the middle of January, 9 matches unbeaten in all competitions, winning 8, conceding just 2 goals. The bottom 4, which you climbed out of on the 3rd of December, is now 17 points beneath you in the league, whereas the playoffs are just 4 points away. How different do you feel within yourself in a situation like this, where the team's gone from underwhelming, disappointing start to the season in terms of points return to can't do anything wrong?
I think I always knew the conversations that I was having with the board and the chairman and Martin Ling after 9-10 games was very calm. Our performances are... You ask Birmingham who their hardest game would have been, and we'd be in the top 3 or 4 games that they played against. We lost the game. We should have beat Bolton at home. The first 4 or 5 games, we made real bad errors where it wasn't like people can pull you out of it. It's literally errors and bang, it's a goal. And then we beat Reading away, we beat Stockport away, and then we drew at home to Peterborough and Wrexham. We thought our season was going. We then lose Sean Clare, who's been a big player for us, Ethan Galbraith, and it's all of a sudden starts to just disrupt that little rhythm that we got into. We lost every game to an international break, and it just felt like the first 7, 8 games, there was no rhythm to the season. It hadn't quite got going, but our performance was really, really good. But then you have a couple of shockers away at Northampton and away at Shrewsbury against teams that we, from the outside, look like we should be beating. And then all of a sudden, a load of other stuff gets brought up about the good performances, but the lack of results. So I've never been worried. I have total faith in the players that we have. We also had a number of young players that were getting used to the level of speed of the game, and we knew that they would come good in the next months, and that's been the case. But performances, bar Northampton, bar Shrewsbury, have been really, really good. And people say it's the last 8 games. It's not. I think over the last probably 15, 16 games, we've probably been the top 6 of the form table. We beat Rotherham at home. We've beat Blackpool at home. We've just then not followed it up. And now we've got a run where every time we've been winning games, we've followed it up with consistent performances and taking. The biggest thing, Ali, is every time we've been on top, we've scored. Whereas in the previous, we had a good half an hour on top against Birmingham. We don't score. And as soon as the game starts to turn for the opposition, which is inevitable in most cases, the opposition score and it puts us in our shell a little bit, which now we're pretty confident, even if we went 1-0 behind, that we've got goals in our team to come back.
I mean, so how do you and your staff measure your team's performance outside of results, which, pretty much everyone knows now can be quite noisy either way? But in terms of the actual performances, how do you best measure Orient's performance in your eyes? Do you have certain metrics that you like to hit? Is it a visual thing, what the team's looking like in and out of possession? You've been a manager for a fair few years now. I'm wondering how you think your team performs, how you measure that.
Yeah, I think visually you get an understanding, the feel of the players, if the way that you're playing, if the formation is suiting us, they get a feel for it, and your visual aspect of the game tells you a lot. But then also, when you don't get results, people can start to question that. So then you can fall back on the data. I think the first 8 games, 70% of shots on target was going in against us. And that's not sustainable. We had a couple of occasions where our goalkeeper has gone for a cross and dropped it, and it's a goal. So our expected goals against, apart from glaring obvious, which obviously expected goals was high, was really, really low. These other teams in our league that was going on winning runs, and we look at their data and it's not sustainable. So we tried to get across to the players that what we're doing is sustainable. We just need a couple of results for it to turn, and then the players start to believe in it more, and you get that snowball effect, and that's exactly what's happened. Even in our run, I think it was a club record 7 clean sheets in on the row. We only conceded 8 shots on target, so it's not like my goalkeeper is pulling off save after save. I think out of possession, defensively, I think we're probably the top 3 or 4 teams in the league. That is sustainable. It's something that you can build real strong foundations from.
It's funny when a team's getting poor results and the numbers are fine, what you often find, because people just want something to blame. Someone needs to be guilty or something needs to be guilty. What I think happens a lot is that in the absence of something technical to point at, when the numbers are pretty good and the performances seem fine, it's often the character of the team or the personality of the team, like intangible stuff that you could never really measure, and therefore you can use it as a way to criticize the team there's no real recourse for that, because no one can say you're right or you're wrong, really. It's an opinion, basically. But character and personality is also clearly important for any sport, and for football and for team sport as well. So this a discussion that I find really interesting is, on the podcast, I would almost never question the mentality of a team, because I have no idea, sitting where I sit, whether errors, for example, are technical errors or whether they're psychological errors, whether there's a mental issue with an individual or a player. But there are some people who would rather just use that than try and work out anything more technical. But given that, as a manager, you do want your team to have a strong personality, you want them to be confident, how do you sort of work out the personality of the team is okay, even if the results are poor, versus actually we might have an issue here with the character of the collective?
Yeah, I think if you ask any manager, they would want their team to represent them as a person, as an ex-player, as a manager, as my personality in the environment that I try to create around the club. So when I look on the pitch, I want to see them represent me in a good way. I also think that you need to have, whatever club you're at, respect for the area that you're in. We're a very diverse in a London City club, and I want the players to reflect that as well. But I think I've never questioned my players. I've still got players that have won a league, and you don't win leagues if you haven't got resilience, if you haven't got character. The only two times that I've questioned my team was Shrewsbury away and Northampton away, and it was the other way. It was an arrogance. It was, we're just going to turn up at these games. We're going to move the ball really slow. We're going to have 70% of the ball, and it's just going to happen. And for me, that was not it was something that you can change. It's not a scared mentality. It's not scared of physicality, scared of duels, dealing with the opposition's crowd or your home crowd. That arrogance of players turn up thinking we're going to have all the ball, we're going to play, and we're just going to win is not a good thing, but it's very, very easy reversible. So I think they're the only two times I've questioned my team's character, and that was the arrogance of expecting to win a game of football because you're playing against teams beneath you. But this team, from where they've come from in such a short space of time, shows that they've got huge resilience. And as I say, we've got young players that are growing into the group, building confidence all the time, building that resilience that they've never had at under 21s football. But I have a core group of experienced players that I've took with me from the League Two title that have, got safe last year with 7-8 games to go, really, really comfortable. And now I try to build on that in a team aspect, but also as individuals as well.
I'm interested in motivation, and I'm going to focus on the top of the pitch actually here, because when results aren't going your way and it's in both boxes where you're falling down rather than between them, clearly goalkeeper errors are very visible, very obvious. And in the case of Orient this season, you made a change to your starting goalkeeper, and the shot stopping numbers don't lie. The new keeper's been fantastic, and the clean sheets or the goals conceded column has started to look healthier. That's pretty straightforward. In attack, there's a lot of focus on the striker to score goals and finish chances, but in the modern game, goals are scored practically by the wide forwards as much as they are by the strikers at the moment. So thinking about them as a unit, when they aren't either executing the chances in the final moments, or just fluffing their lines when it gets to the moment of making a shot, and they are young players, as they often are in your team in particular, what's the balance between trying to motivate them with honesty, even if it's harsh potentially, and we're often told that modern players don't always like harsh words compared to a previous generation, versus a bit of love and a bit of this is what you need to do, something more technical. When do you find the balance between just being like, come on, you need to do this a little bit better because you're not quite there yet, versus seriously, mate, if you don't sort this out, you are going to get dropped?
Yeah, I think the forward play is a little bit different, and that's something that we wasn't great at the start of the season. At the start of the season, we went 1-0 behind, and there was a rush and a panic in our players, especially our front players, that every time we won the ball back, we had to sprint on their last line. We had to try and get a goal back as quick as possible. And we all know that if you're trying to create chances and you're rushing and you're running onto people and blocking your spaces, then it's never going to work. So I think around end of August and then probably the first 2 weeks of September, we sat down, and I like giving front players a lot of freedom, because I think sometimes individuals that can sniff space, we obviously identify opposition's fullbacks and centre halves that maybe they might not like a certain movement or do certain things, and we'll go through that with the players. But I also want the front players to have a freedom to do things. And when we spoke to the likes of Ollie O'Neill, Kelman, Dan Aggie, Sonny Perkins, Geelong Jaisimi, the actual comeback from them is we want more coaching in the final third, which was music to my ears. So then we went through we more or less split our team off, and I just solely worked with the wide players, Jamie Donnelly or Ethan Galbraith as a 10, and then the centre forward. And we was working on so much in training, and coming off training, we was watching training back, and it was really, really good. But then we didn't have an immediate result. And sometimes that can be frustrating, or you go away from it. We just kept working. And I think in the last 2.5 months, we've scored a hell of a lot of goals, a lot of threes, some fours. I think we beat Stockport away 4-1, Barnsley away 4-0. We've had a couple of 3-0 wins at home. So sometimes you've got to have a clear vision in what you want, but then ask the players to trust it and keep doing it and don't veer off it when it doesn't work, and just keep practicing, keep watching, keep practicing with the players. And then once they get the rewards of that, wow, you can see them grow, and you can see them, the movements more, the things that we're working on, you can see them doing it even more. And I think when O'Neill starts to score, Dan Aggie, we've got 2 strikers now on 10 plus goals. So when he starts to see the rewards of that, they buy into it even more. So that's been pretty powerful.
We've just recorded this afternoon a mid-season predictions podcast, and we both picked Orient to finish inside the playoffs in 6th spot. And there's quite a big chunk of teams from which it felt like you're kind of, almost throwing a dart, to be honest with you, because there's kind of pros and cons to each side. Funnily enough, the way that me and George look at the game, one of the knocks on Orient is you've won so many games in the last month or two that we might be a bit blinded by that. And realistically, well, you might prove us wrong, but realistically, most teams don't win, 90% of their games for another 4 months. Well, we will see on that. But we both have you pegged inside the playoffs. It's been a pretty crazy season, I guess, from your point of view when it comes to expectations. But are Orient a playoff level team in your eyes?
I think the biggest thing for us is the injuries. We haven't got, for example, we haven't got a B team, an under 21 team. So if we lose our first team players, we're then dipping into the youth team, which is a big gap. So, I think we need to do we've got a couple of injuries at the moment. Ali O'Neill's out, Dan Aggie's out, and that can be hurtful for us. So we need to do something in the window. You look at the top 4 at the moment, I think that's cemented, but you look at their squads, the amount of investment that they've put together, the top 4 is a huge investment. And not just that, you look at someone like Charlton who are below us, the investment in them squads have been huge. So one thing we won't lack for tactics, we won't lack for application and determination. We'll give it everything we've got. And when teams come to play Leyton Orient at Brisbane Road, when it's full, every single one of them expect a real tough game. So that won't change. We need a couple in. And for me, if we keep everyone fit from now to the end of the season, we'll be there or thereabouts. This is not, for example, you're saying you've won 90% of the last 8, 9, 10 games. This has been a period of winning for Leyton Orient over a 3-year period. We started last season off really, really poorly. We then went an unbelievable run from December to January, but then we lost all our players. So the end of the season, when we felt we had a playoff push, the players that had to pick every single week did run the race. We're going into the last 4 or 5 games with no legs, no energy in the team at all. We then started this season poorly because we signed people late. We need to bed them into the team. We're signing young players, and now we're getting going again. It's important that we try and keep our squad as fresh and as big as possible. And if we do that, we've got a chance.
I mean, if that is the case to such a big extent, more so than other teams around you, and maybe more so than other clubs you've managed, other squads in previous seasons, is there anything different that you do in order to try and keep your 14, 15, 16 key players fit and available? The schedule barely allows it. The competitiveness of the division barely allows it. But equally, you overplay them, they're out for 8 weeks, you've got a bigger issue. So whether it's using sports science, the physios, just your own intuition in terms of load management, how on earth do you approach that to try and make sure that no one gets injured while understanding that that's impossible to achieve?
Well, actually, it's impossible. Stopping injuries is sometimes impossible. We speak with the sports scientists all the time. For example, we rested Kelman and Ollie O'Neill for 1 game, and we only kept Dan Aggie in. Dan Aggie got injured, but we rested Ollie O'Neill for that game, and when Ollie O'Neill came back and was fresh, he got injured. So there's no right or wrong way. We look at the data, we go through everything, we look at red flags, we bring our training schedule really down when we've had a lot of games. But sometimes, Dan Aggie's was a contact injury. He's running through, he shoots, the defender comes across and just catches each other's legs. So that's really difficult to control.
Outside of football, there are some industries where people say, it's good to work in teaching because there'll always be kids and they'll always need teaching, or it's good to work in sewage because there'll always be sewage. In football, it strikes me that physio is a good role within football because there'll always be injuries, there'll always be players to treat at whatever club you're at. You mentioned earlier that one thing you won't lack for is tactics. As you probably remember, it's a passion of mine for sure, and having spoken to you in what was your second managerial role at Swindon. Some very identifiable traits of a Richie Wellens team when I watch Orient now to when I watch Swindon then. But football moves pretty quickly as well, and trends change too. So I'm wondering, on a broad level, would you say the way that you see the game and how you set your teams up to play has changed at all since you started managing?
Yeah, the way that we play at the moment, Leyton Orient, is totally different to the Swindon team. I had totally different personnel, different individual qualities, different characteristics that the players have. So yeah, I mean, you've got to work out. It's no good saying, you look at Man United at the moment. It's like, okay, Ruben Amorim wants to play 3-4-3. He's quite an you can identify that formation pretty quickly. But if you haven't got the players to utilise it, sometimes it can be a struggle. Now, he's prepared to go through that struggle because he's just come in. He's a big manager from a foreign league. He has a reputation. And Manchester United will clearly give him the time to, one, try and get his style and imprint on the team, but then also in long term get the players in that will eventually fit into his style. You try and get that time in the EFL, it's very, very difficult. So when I come in at Leyton Orient, we were 20th in League Two. Nobody's bothered about style. First and foremost, I will only work on out of possession stuff. I wanted to make us hard to beat. Naturally, we had some good footballers in the team. Naturally, I had two goal scorers that could score as goals. I had two wingers in Theo Archibald and Paul Smythe that naturally can go past people, can run, can create chances. But what they don't do naturally is all the defensive side, get into a defensive structure and work off the back of that. So for the first 6 or 7 games, no one's bothered about a style. I think I draw my first 2 and then win the next 3. We pull right away from the relegation zone, and then I can start not only imprinting a style of football in possession in training, but I can actually take it into a games. Whereas at the start, I was only bothered about results. You look at our first 4 or 5 games this year, we have to tweak it a little bit because I'll keep doing the same things. You start losing 8, 9, 10 in a bounce, your job has gone. It's not one of these big clubs that will give you that time. So we all know the ruthlessness of the industry, and it's forever changing with tactics. I think the most important thing is understanding your players, working with your players, and ultimately having conversations with your players if they feel comfortable doing the things that you're asking of them, and then try and work on things that as the weeks go by, you can improve them.
That being said, I'm sure one of the aspects of playing a certain way was, in your eyes, was about how it translates up the leagues and a style of play that could see you go again, could see you challenge higher at the level above, which, we sit here today Orient in a good position and very much challenging for the top spots in League One. So on that sense, it seems to have worked. In your eyes, is that at all down to the style of play, or is that just down to a great culture and a great group that you've got? It's nothing to do with tactics.
Yeah, I think culture and the environment that you work in is an important aspect of it, no doubt about it. But of course, tactically, you need to be able to compete against which we have to accept sometimes bigger clubs with bigger budgets. So you look at the teams that have come up from League League Two in recent years. Forest Green are now in a conference. Cheltenham are back in League Two. Carlisle are back in League Two. Northampton are down near the bottom. A couple of other teams. The only teams that actually can go up and up and up are the Wrexhams, the Stockport. Well, yeah, the manager's doing a really good job. They've also got a big fat wallet that they can go out and spend and spend and spend. We, ourselves and Stevenage, are the ones that have stayed up, competed, trying to flirt with the playoffs, that have not spent a lot of money. You look at the guys that went up from our league last year. Portsmouth, huge club. Derby, huge club. Oxford sneaking in through the playoffs. Well, now they've not got the best players. Now they've not got the biggest budget. And you see them at the bottom end of the table and they're struggling. So you either need a big wallet to keep going and like an Ipswich, where they go from League One to the Championship and they just go, okay, we're going to go again. We're going to go again. Then they go to the Premier League and spend another 130 million. That's a great way of doing it. But if you know you haven't got that at your disposal, then you need to have the culture, have the environment, make sure that the players are on board, make sure that you have 5 or 6 experienced players that understand the culture, run the dressing room. And then obviously tactically you have to be spot on every week.
Yeah, I'm sure it doesn't hurt when you're trying to attract someone like Jamie Donnelly from Spurs or other loanees from big clubs, from what I understand and have a bit of experience in this, the pitches that get made, or the way that those clubs go out to the EFL clubs to work out what would be a good landing spot, style of play, I think for some of them is quite an important part of that. So that's really interesting. I mean, but before we let you go, do you think there are any misconceptions about you as a manager? You're in I think it's your 5th job, isn't it? And since we've been doing the pod, you've been a pretty big fixture. 2 promotions from League Two, 5 different jobs. When it comes to analysing managers, people generally focus on the worst stuff rather than the best stuff. I'm just wondering if kind of overall, now that you've had a decent go at football management, whether you think there's any misconceptions about you as a manager.
I think you have to break it down and look at the nuts and bolts of it. I took over Oldham, who was bottom of the league, and we get relegated on 50 points. Not many clubs get relegated on 50 points, but my return was 1.5 something a game, which is a mid-table record. But people just want to label you a relegation at you. So that can be difficult. For Swindon, you take a team from 20, I think it was 21st in in League Two. So 15 months later, not just getting promoted via the playoffs, finishing 7th, winning the league comfortably. We would have won the league comfortably. We was the best team by a mile. With then you go to Salford, and I do think that Salford was tough because it was COVID. So my worst spell as a manager has come under COVID. The intensity, the passion of the crowd, the way that I want my team to be intense. I didn't enjoy it. The players didn't enjoy it. Nobody enjoyed COVID. And then you look at the Leyton Orient job, again, winning the league within 15 months of nearly getting relegated. How many people win one league? Not many. How many people win 2 leagues? So I think my record stands up against most. I think I've won 3 trophies in 4 years, and I haven't won 1 trophy with a team that is expected to win trophies. It's not like I've been one of the big boys of the league. I think Swindon were 28-1 to win the league, and Leyton Orient were 25-1. So if you put that together, it's probably a big achievement than Leicester's 5,000-1 win the league in, I think it was 2016, wasn't it? So there can be misperceptions. I think I'm a well-rounded manager. I think when you're younger, you make mistakes, absolutely, because you want to spend your time on the grass, you want to work with players. And as you get older, as you develop, as you go through more situations, you learn that managing people, being a good communicator, managing sideways and above is crucial, not only to have a good relationship with them people, but I do believe that once the messages from above you are really, really good, they translate through to you and they filter through the players, through the staff, and all they are good messages. So I think I've learned that over a period of time. It's difficult. Sometimes it's more difficult when you retire at 37 and then you go straight into managing because you've not gone through that learning period. I watched Salford the other day play Man City, and Carl Robinson is nearly at 1,000 games. He's at 700. He could be at like 1,000 games before which is unbelievable. But him, Kieran McKenna, them really good coaches have retired at 23, 24, 25. So they then become better teachers, which a big part of the balancing act between being a player going into a manager and having I had a 22-year playing career, and I've got all this knowledge and all these experiences in my head, but then I have to be able to teach them to my players in the right way, the way that I deliver, the way that I act around them. When I think that these younger coaches have got a head start on the players on that, I really do. And it probably took me definitely a year to work out them processes that work for me, that work for the players. But like I say, I think that every job's, some of these guys that come across from Europe, they go into the Championship with a 60, 70, 80% win rate. Well, they're managing in a league that for 95% of the time, they are favourites to win the game. You get managers that are in these Championship, League One, League Two. I know these favourites. You get the Championship teams that have come down from relegate from the Premier League, and they have a massive, massive advantage. But all the others, every game's 50-50. Every game's tight. You've got to go to the end. You're not abroad winning 3-0 and the opposition have given and you're playing for time. You're 3-0 up in the EFL. You're still worried that one game just might change momentum. No one gives in. It's a brilliant league throughout the whole divisions. A lot of good coaches, and for me to keep going week in, week out. I think I'm 300-400 games now. I'm not sure. Week in, week out against these good coaches. They're all good coaches now. They are really, really well coached teams. So I think it's just a testament. If you stay in the game, these guys that have got 1,000 managerial games, unbelievable, because every single game is a challenge, and it's a brilliant. You talk about the sack all the time, but when you're in it, sometimes you forget that it's a brilliant game to be involved in, and management is the second best thing to play in. It's a brilliant industry to be in.
Yeah, manager win percentage is one of our least favourite stats. I think it's fair to say on the pod.
It's nonsense. It's nonsense.
Well, yours is probably not bad. Yeah, I bet you'll use yours in the right setting, and why not?
No, again, but you have to put it win rate to who you're managing.
Yeah,
I took over teams that have been Oldham 24th in the league, Leyton Orient 20th in the league, Swindon 25th. So it doesn't match up with someone who goes in at
I tell you
someone
what,
who's second or third in the league. It's difficult to marry them up.
There'll be someone who could do this, someone clever with a computer. I think a really good metric would be basically win percentage, but put through a filter of essentially what odds your team were to win every single game that you've managed. You obviously could do that if you had enough time. Yeah. I think that would be really interesting to see. Well,
I think it's a great idea.
Right, I'll get to work. Cheers, Richie. It's been really good to chat to you.
No problem. Cheers, Al.
I wish you all the best for the rest of this season.
Thanks, mate.